Hi everyone. I've recently been reading through this book called Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I'm about halfway through at the moment. The gist of the book, from what I'm getting, is that there are ways to increase our effectiveness in a position of leadership by tearing down our armor that can tend to get in the way and become a problematic obstacle, which obstructs our effectiveness. And Brené's recommendation is that there are ways in which we can be vulnerable that can actually enhance the end result. So in one of the examples that she gives of what not to do, an acquaintance of hers decides that her recommendation is a good one, and he wants to increase his effectiveness. So he decides that if he's going to lead with vulnerability, as she's recommending, that means disclosure. And his decision in this case was to disclose some information that actually probably would have weakened his effectiveness, hindered morale, and caused investors to lose faith. So she took him aside and said, that's probably not a good idea. When I was reading this, it got me thinking about what disclosure means in terms of ethics. So in the past, I have read over a little bit about ethics, and one of the topics that came up was privacy and why we have privacy laws, why privacy is important. And then there was a whole big list of all kinds of reasons why we value privacy and why we think it is an important right and an important part of our society. One of the reasons that quite surprised me and that I wasn't really looking for when I was reading through this list of reasons why we think privacy is important that came up, this reason was actually that we like or need to present ourselves as different people, or we need to present different aspects of who we are to various people in order to maintain different types of relationships. We may not want to be as close to different people, so we may hold back from disclosing certain aspects about ourselves when it comes to dealing with those people, because we want to have varying levels of depth or connection to different characters. Now, in terms of ethics, how would we look at disclosure or the failure to disclose information? That got me thinking about this a little bit. For example, if we look at utilitarianism, the goal is to carry out actions which will result in the least amount of harm. If we don't want to hurt somebody, then we shouldn't tell them everything about ourselves. We are at liberty to hold back information if it's going to protect people's feelings or protect the end outcome somehow. If we are following Kantianism, then we may decide that people, because they are rational beings, need to be treated rationally. Therefore, they deserve to have all of the information available that is relevant to them, and then they can make the decision themselves as to whether or not, based on all the facts, they still want to have interactions with you. And finally, virtue ethics. What does virtue ethics say about honesty? So under the virtue ethics structure, honesty is something that is valued. Now, the opposite of a virtue is a vice. And remember, there are two types of vices. There is one of excess, and there is another type of vice where there's not enough. So there's not enough honesty, or there's a wrong type of honesty. So if honesty is a virtue, the excess vice would be something like exaggeration, or taking it too far, disclosing information where it's not prudent to do so. And the opposite of that would obviously be withholding vital information that someone else needs to make a decision. I feel that at the end of the day, what we really do, if we're trying to be ethical, is that we may tend to move between these three ideas as suits the situation, our perspective, and our relationships to the people involved. But I think that we don't always tend to look at things as black and white. And that's where we may tend to get tripped up, and we may tend to make choices that in hindsight we feel weren't the best. What do you think? Should we always be honest? Should we always disclose all the facts? Should we always tell someone that we have an issue with them and that we don't really like them? Should we always tell people that we prefer not to deal with them? Or should we sometimes choose to keep our mouths shut? Should we sometimes choose to hold back certain facts to protect other people's feelings? What do you think?